Here on JAKIB Sports. Football Friday, joined now by Scott Grayson from Fox 29. Scott, how you doing on this Football Friday, man?
I'm good, guys. Sorry about yesterday. A little mix-up on my part.
No worries.
No worries. It's always my fault, Scott. I gotta remind people, and sometimes I get bogged down, as you know. It's a grind this time of the year, and certainly for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Keeping you busy, John. I don't understand.
Yeah. But with this team heading out to the West Coast, right as it gets a little bit cold, it starts feeling like football, and the Eagles go to Los Angeles. It's like we can't get a feel, but we got a snow game last night, Scott. We can't get football weather for the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll probably get it in Baltimore a week after this game, but we've been talking about. I don't know what it is, but this Rams team, I don't like this matchup from the Rams' perspective. I don't know what the Rams can hang their hat on.
You mean you don't like it? You don't like how the Eagles match up with the Rams, or
No, I don't like how the Rams match up with the Eagles. We always talk about styles make fights and yada yada yada. I don't like this matchup for the Los Angeles Rams a little bit. I'm looking for a reason. Like, why can I pick the Rams? I can't come up with one.
You know, the only one I can give you is I'm curious to see how Kupp and Nakua. How McVay tries to get them into space against this Eagles secondary because they've been playing so well lately. I know he constantly has motion. He constantly is trying to do things to get them into that space. And in talking to Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell and Slay, they know that the biggest thing here is just not to give those guys cushion because Stafford will find them if you give them cushion. So I agree with you. I at first I was kind of like, oh, the West Coast trip, that can kind of wear on a team. The Eagles, will it do to them? But they had the extra mini bye. They had a few extra days off. They should be a little healthier. They should be all the reasons as it gets closer to the game. It's one of those where I'm buying more and more into believing this is going to be a win for the Eagles than I was maybe right after the Commanders game. I agree with you. I think that, everything points to you giving Vic Fangio a few extra days to kind of come up with a game plan with these guys. And, I just, the more I look at it, the more I think that I agree with you. I think this is an Eagles win.
I think the interesting part of it, though, is that Vic Fangio versus Sean McVay matchup. And you brought up the two receivers. They're better than anybody at finding the space and zone defenses. Do you think Vic will change it up a little this week, Scott? He played a lot of zone versus Jaden Daniels. There's pros and cons to doing that against a quarterback like Matthew Stafford. What do you think Vic Fangio will throw at him to try and get him off his game?
I was trying to think about that and try to figure that out for myself. The one thing is, if what they've done, they've been doing well. If you try to do something different with these rookies, are you starting to put yourself? Are you over? Are you trying to reinvent the wheel? Are you doing too much when what you've been doing is actually doing okay? I wonder how much they'll try to do. You're right; they've been playing a lot of zone, and the problem with a zone with those guys, they're so shifty and fast and quick twitch that if they sense they found a hole, they're going to sit. And Stafford's so good that he'll find them. If you don't get that pass rush home, which was, we all know, that's one thing the Eagles haven't done well, is gotten that pass rush there quickly. They are getting sacks, and the defensive line has admitted they're getting sacks because the secondary is doing a good job behind them in coverage. So, I'll be curious to see what they try to do. Obviously, I think Vic has done a nice job of, with these younger quarterbacks, trying to confuse them. But a guy like Matthew Stafford, who's seen a lot, I don't know that you're going to confuse him much. So I think the key is going to be
no,
really
definitely
trying to
not.
mix it up.
Yeah, Matthew's kind of seen it all. I was talking to Slay loves Matthew Stafford. Broke in with Matthew in a bad situation, but he has tremendous respect for him. And, I reminded him, Matthew Stafford's been playing for, 16, 17 years. He's only 36 years old. Slay was like, oh, yeah, he came in at 20. And, Kellen Moore was once a teammate of Matthew Stafford. And Kellen Moore's been retired for, I don't know how long, 7 years. And he's an offensive coordinator. And they're the same age, Scott Grayson. Matthew's like 4 months older than Kellen Moore. And they're the same age. He's been an amazing player. One of those underrated because he played on a bad team for so long. And everybody was like, well, he can't elevate, blah, 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 all that nonsense. He gets to a good team, he wins a Super Bowl. It's magic how that happens. But yeah, that's the one guy you have to be concerned about because he can beat anybody if he's hot. But I'm really buying into this Eagles defense, and I mean, everybody. I deal with this every week, and they say, "What is Vic going to do? What is Vic going to do?" I don't know. That's the beauty of Vic Fangio. Like everybody else has got his scheme, and he's got his scheme and his philosophy, but he changes. Against New Orleans, he rolls out that 6-man front. Everybody's like,
Right.
how are you going to stop the run game? He rolls it out. He hasn't put that out there in 6 years. He rolls it out there. Last week against Jaden Daniels, I can't tell you how much my buddy and your buddy Mike Gill asked me. Pittsburgh blitz 53% of the time. Is Vic Fangio going to copy Pittsburgh? He blitzed twice, Scott. He blitzed twice. 35 pass opportunities twice.
Right.
He does what he feels will affect the other team. And it's
And
nobody
yeah, look,
knows.
yeah, and when you look at it, you have to ask yourself, well, why? Why? It's so fun, I think, to see a defense here where you can see that the linebackers are such an integral part of their success. And the flexibility those guys have, the way that they can chase down the ball, they're always around the ball, both of them, depending on which side of the field it goes to. And I think that's been such a big key to why Vic has been able to do so much stuff is because those two guys have really, dove into their spots really well, played really well. And it's just been a long time since we've seen two linebackers here in this city that have played at this level. And I think that's a big part of it. They're flexible. They can do what he wants them to do. I think, look, Josh Sweat is really kind of coming on a little bit too in some of his role and what's been asked of him in Vic's defense. And you're right. I think Vic just, he will find a way. We will talk about something next week that he did in this game that I don't think anybody was expecting in how he decides whether it's how he covers, Puka and Cup, how he tries to get pressure on Stafford, or what he does to try to get something working his way. I mean, look, the best thing that could happen for them, I think, is look, I don't think they'll have trouble stopping the run. They've done a good job of that all season. It's if the Eagles can get up and start making them really have to sling it all over the field. Matthew Stafford will give you an opportunity to pick one or two of them off. He trusts that arm a lot. And if you can get an opportunity and get one of those takeaways, it can change, can really, really go a long way to locking this one in. But you're right. I think Vic's been better than I expected, John and Zander. He came here and I think it was like, okay, after what we saw last year with the debacle that was defensive coordinator last year between Patricia, it just wasn't good. And you see Vic here, you go, okay, well, you're going to have a guy who knows what he's doing. The question is, will he be able to get it done with this group? And he has, and it's been a lot of fun to watch. I mean, as good as this offense is with the key prime names that you have, all these star players, I really think it's the defense that has allowed this team to be 8-2.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And that's why I think a fast start's going to be big in this game because if you get Stafford behind the, playing from behind, the risk of throwing that interception is there and will only increase. So we'll see how that goes. I want to ask you, Scott, about the offense here. There's a lot of optimism growing in the city right now for this football team. They're 6-0 coming out of the bye. They're now an 8-2 football team. There's one thing that everybody's still a little concerned about, and that's the passing game. And they're 22nd ranked in the passing game. It doesn't really look all that impressive at times. Sometimes it looks stagnant and ugly, and clunky is a word we like to use here on Birds 365. With no Devontae Smith potentially this week, we don't know yet, but he missed the last 2 days of practice. How much of an impact could that have on the game? And what do you expect to see from that Eagles offense this weekend?
Well, if everybody knows that the game will start and live on offensively for the Eagles, Saquon Barkley. And we know it's going to be, whether or not they continue to let him continue to go. I don't see concern from the Eagles, by the way, over his workload. I know fans, and we've talked about, look how many touches he's got. If they play 2 playoff games, he's looking at 400 touches this year. I mean, John, we've been the guy is built like a brick house. I mean, he can take a little bit of a beating, and he's got it coming off the mini bye here again. He's coming off of little extra rest. I think they're going to feature him again. And the formula to me that has worked really well is to get the ground game going, to rely on it, to continue to trust it like they did last week. It didn't light the world on fire in the first half, but wearing down the defense and that defensive front worked to your advantage in the second half. And Saquon Barkley's been so good in the second half, partly because I think that's what they're doing. They're really wearing down the combination of the offensive line and Saquon and them having to tackle him, that they're wearing down that defense, and it's allowing them to be so successful in the second half with the run. And look, as far as the passing game goes, especially in the first half, it's not pretty. It's been inconsistent. It's clunky, as you said. I think it's a good word. And Jalen just has to find a rhythm. And finally, it seems like when they are able to get that play action going and he's able to step back and at the back of his drop, deliver the ball, it can get going. And so when you ask me, like, my formula is I want Saquon to get 20 touches a game. I want Jalen to only have to throw it 24, 25 times. When he has to throw it 30 to 40 times in a game, I'll tell you right now, that probably means things aren't going your way. And so if it's only 24, 25 times, that means you're probably getting 20 receptions out there. Well, who's getting them? There's a lot of guys to catch that ball. So you ask about Devontae Smith. If he doesn't play this week, I think they're going to be all right. I mean, Dallas Goedert's still out there. You still got A.J. Brown. I am seeing a growing increase in the chemistry. It's slow, but it's coming between Jalen and Jahan Dotson. So I think that there are other opportunities out there if Devontae can't go, that I'm not worried about this offense. That offensive line's still there. Jalen's legs, he's using them better this year than he did last year. I think he's just got to find that escape route up the middle through the rush as opposed to trying to escape out the backside. That doesn't seem to work as much, and he's got to be able to do it when he sees it. There's just some things he's missing here and there still. It's got to get polished, more polished for Jalen. But look, Saquon Barkley's going to be featured. I would expect nothing less than that, and I expect them to try to wear down that Rams defense and put this team up and again, work from in front, let the defense play with the lead. All that's your formula right there. And again, I don't want to see Jalen try to throw it more than 25 times.
Well, I agree with your assessment there, Scott. The best case scenario is what you laid out, Jalen throwing the ball 25 times. But you have to play a certain way to make that happen. I was talking to Lane earlier this week, and he mentioned, teams are going to start loading the box. And I said, well, why haven't they started doing that yet, Lane? And he said, well, they have. And he pointed out that Washington actually did a really good job for 3 quarters, stopping the run. And as you mentioned, the dam kind of broke in the fourth quarter. But you can't break that dam, Scott, if you're losing by 17-6 or instead of 10-6. So, it's almost the complementary nature. The reason they were able to do that is because the defense kept them in the game and they were able to stay disciplined in the running game. The point is, when you have to throw it 40 times, you have to throw it 40 times to win a game, Scott. Can the Eagles win that game?
That is a great question. And I don't know that I have the faith in Jalen Hurts right now to do that. It means he has to see his reads. He has to find the right guys. He has to trust them to throw them the ball. And he has that trust with some of these guys, but he doesn't have it with all of them. And, he still is missing. I mean, look, I was listening to the game last night as I was driving around on the radio, and it was before the snow had come. Like, Russell Wilson was missing guys that were open. They were, they're talking about it. It's kind of a thing league-wide. These quarterbacks are not all, 100% and seeing every guy that's open on the field, and Jalen's one of them. And he has to be better about seeing the field. He has to be better about delivering the ball on time. He is making the right throws. Sometimes it's just a touch too late. And so that's some of the stuff that's got to get polished up here to where I would finally say, yeah, I think they can win that game where he throws it 40 times. Sometimes he's on, and they can win that game. Sometimes he's not, and it turns into interceptions, and he holds the ball too long, and that turns into strip sacks. And we've seen that. We saw that earlier this year. So I'm not there where I can go to that point and say, yeah, But you're right. You bring up the conversation you had with Lane. I was standing there as you had. I was fascinated by it. I enjoyed hearing Lane's thoughts. And he talked about one play in particular that scored that they kept. He said it after the game on Thursday night. He said it again when you were there talking to him, John, earlier this week, that they kept a play that they wanted to run in the second half. And it broke for a touchdown. I think that's a little bit of the veteran aspect you get from a coordinator like Kellen Moore, to know there's a play he wants to hold on and run in the second half. And it's something that the opponent hasn't seen yet, right? Usually by the second half, they get a feel for what you're doing. Now it's a matter of what can we do that you can't stop. This was something he rolled out that they hadn't run yet. So, there are things they are understanding. And that's what that conversation showed me, John, is that they understand that these teams are trying different things to stop the run. And it's just not working yet. And I love the fact that the Eagles are sticking with it, not saying, okay, and this is some stuff I think Nick had done in the past when he was calling plays. Okay, well, we're going to show we're smarter than you. I know what you're trying to do, so I'm going to do something totally opposite of what you think I'm going to do. No, the Eagles know they're trying to stop the run, and they're running it anyway. I love that. In this city, that's the mentality here, right? We're going to do it, even if you think you can stop it, because we're that good, and we don't think you can. And I love that they're keeping that mentality, and the offensive line is leading the way, and Saquon's, taking it and embracing it. And Kenny Gainwell, to his credit, when he comes in, he's finding some of those holes, as well. So I was intrigued by that conversation you had with Lane, and I loved his answers to those questions.
Scott, speaking of Kellen Moore, and I don't want to pollute the question, but I don't think Kellen Moore was brought here to improve the Eagles' running game, which has already been very dominant in recent years. How do you evaluate what he's been for this team, especially considering the passing game is not quite where I think they want it to be yet?
Yeah, it's not. And I think, the great thing is that they all understand that, look, we're only just past the midway point of the season. So there's time to fix this in terms of that passing game. And it's a matter of really just timing and Jalen Hurts, in my opinion. So that's just more reps, more film, more hopefully, work that takes place behind the scenes. You're right. He wasn't brought here to make the run game, what it is. I'm frankly surprised we haven't seen Saquon be more of a factor in the receiving game at this point, and maybe he will at some point. But it was the motion, it was the way they were going to try to scheme these guys open to throw
Nobody
the ball.
talks about motion anymore, Scott.
I know we don't. We don't. But they are using it, and they are trying to do different things to kick blocks in with a motion guy, or to maybe spring a guy like a Devontae Smith by putting him in motion and getting him open. But it hasn't. They all say it after these games too. It's not a finished product. We still have a lot of work to do on this offense. We have, and that's the humble side of things that I appreciate from these guys, is that they're looking at what they're doing offensively and going, look, it's good, but it's not as good as it should be or as it could be, and that they understand there's things to fix. I think that's where Kellen Moore has to, continue to grow this offense. It's great that they have the run game going, but that game will come. That game will come where it's not there. And John's right. They'll be behind by 6-7 points. They're going to have to throw the ball to win the game. And they're working on this stuff every week, and maybe we're not seeing it because they don't need to go to it yet, right? The running game's working. We can stick with it. We don't need to throw it that much. We don't need to run those plays that are in the playbook and sitting there, waiting to be used for that game that does happen. And I think it's coming. I think it could be Baltimore. It could be Pittsburgh. That does a good job of limiting some of that run, that forces them to have to throw it more. And I'm looking forward to seeing what I really hope this team gets tested in that way, because as they get closer and closer to making that run into the playoffs, they're going to have to know what they can and can't do, or need to work on through some of that stuff that they have to handle.
We are used to being here, Scott. In fact, through 10 games, the Eagles are actually a little bit worse than they were in 2022 and 2023 when they started 9-1. They are 8-2. They are becoming this standard sort of in the NFL, certainly in the NFC, for success, with the anomaly of the collapse last year. So what makes you look at this team and say they're closer to 2022, where they can sustain it, versus 2023, when it looked like San Francisco stole their soul? Could Baltimore steal their soul on December 1st?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? And I've kind of left the locker room the last few weeks kind of thinking that to myself, like why? Because this was about the time, you're right, when the bottom fell out and last year became the epic collapse that it was. And so, okay, for me, it's the chemistry. It's the unity that you feel or see in that locker room. It's the guys like Slay who request to have Quinyon Mitchell's locker next to him. This is the guy who could be coming here to take your job, but he put him at his locker next to him so they could help grow him, and help improve him and keep him growing because he knows our success this year is going to be partly dictated by how well that guy plays. So you look at the veteran leadership, the mix of the youth, and I look at the chemistry. Again, this defense, the problem for me in the first 4 games was a guy like C.J. Gardner-Johnson. The one play that sticks out in my mind was when Quinyon Mitchell was right there for an interception. And he fought him in the air for the ball and it fell incomplete. CJ did. And it was like, what are you doing? Like that's a total selfish play. Since then, this defense is playing for each other. They are playing together. There is no selfish play going out there, not padding stats in some way. I see guys, really making the plays that need to be made because it's my turn to make the play. They're in my area, not somebody playing out of their mind, trying to go somewhere that's not part of the scheme. So I feel that chemistry. So when you say what's the difference, and I don't know if you feel it, John, when you're in the locker room and hear these guys and you see them. I mean, how many guys, right? These practices lately when we're in there on Wednesdays have been ending late in the day. These guys could just come in, grab their stuff, and go. There's really nothing else holding them there. And there were a ton of them playing ping pong in that side room, the rec room, if you will, and hanging out in there together. I don't remember seeing that last year. I mean, I heard that ping pong ball going nonstop on Wednesday when we were there. So I feel like the chemistry, the unity, again, the playing for each other, the leadership that has emerged, the obviously the level of play from the young guys who've stepped up is not nothing. It doesn't feel anything to me like it did last year when they really, frankly, couldn't answer why they were winning, and then they couldn't figure out why they were losing. They know why they're winning this year. They figured out, right? We used it earlier on. What's their identity? This team has figured out their identity on both sides of the ball, and there wasn't that last year. So I think that's all the reasons why, to me, this is going to be a sustained run into the playoffs, and I think they're going to be right there competing for the 1 seed. By the time it's all said and done.
Yeah, Scott, you went right where I was going to go in terms of last year. This is kind of the point in the year where things fell off the rails last year. I think it was a year ago yesterday or 2 days ago that the Eagles beat the Chiefs, moved to 10-1 or whatever it was at that time, and then the things fell off the rails. What have you seen that's different this year that would lead you to believe that they're not in danger of that happening again this year? Is it as simple as the coordinators? Is it as simple as the teams playing ping pong together and they're all best friends? What have you seen from this team this year to show that they're more of a unit, or at least seemingly more of a unit this year?
Well, it's. I think it's having each other's backs. Look, Jake Elliott had his worst game as an Eagle, right? But the team found a way to rally around him, behind him, despite him, and still come out with a win on that Thursday night. That team doesn't win that game last year. They don't have that confidence to go out there despite all those missed points that were left off the board, and go out there and win the game anyway. They didn't have the Saquon Barkley, right? This team knows, we have a potential MVP candidate in our backfield. That's not nothing. Running behind an offensive line that knows it's one of the best in the league. That's not nothing. And this defense has emerged as one of the best in the league. They believe they're one of the best in the league now. They all have bought in to that scheme that they've bought into what Vic Fangio's selling. So I think you have confidence in the guy next to you to make the play. You have the chemistry that's there that I talked about off the field. I hear these guys talking all the time about how the meeting rooms are fun. Some of that can get to be a real drag when you sit in those dark rooms and you're watching film and you're trying to talk about stuff and analyzing things. And I hear these guys talking about how they're having fun in the meeting rooms. And that's not something that happened last year. So these are all reasons why off the field, and this is where I think you can go into and say, well, I'm turning my thought on Nick Sirianni around a little bit to say, look, you have to appreciate what you have while it's here, because I think there were times we didn't appreciate what Andy Reid was when he was here. and then he's gone. And I think Nick is doing a great job behind the scenes and off the field of getting these guys ready to play every week. And we don't give him credit for that. We look at the decisions he makes that make us go, what were you thinking when you didn't kick that field goal? Or why did you go for it on fourth down there? I think, look, Nick's records is what it is. And I know they've played some bad teams along the way, but you don't get to this win percentage by accident. And these guys, when you think back to it, Nick was on the hot seat. This team came out and played like its hair was on fire for their head coach. All that stuff to me is another reason to say, okay, I'm willing to buy into them, continuing this run.
All right, I'm going to give you 4 things, Scott. I'm going to give you 2 offensive, 2 defenses. I want you to put them in order, go 4-1, 1-4, whatever you're most comfortable with as the most important part of this team. On offense, I'm going to go Saquon Barkley and the offensive line. And on defense, I'm going to go Zach Bond and Vic Fangio. The entire team, the success, the 8-2 of the Philadelphia Eagles. Number 1 through 4. Those are the top 4 things.
I guess I have to go with the defensive thing first because I said that I think the big reason why they're 8-2 is because of the defense. Look, this offense has sputtered in the first half, and the defense has kept them right there to where they could blow up in the second half and then put a game away, right? So, I'm going Vic Fangio 1.
Woo, Vic. I love Vic.
Because I just think what he's done to these opponents is not nothing, obviously. And Saquon would be 2. Again, I think this offense believes with him on the field. They have a legit home run threat that could run the ball all the way, to the end zone every time. And then I'll probably go offensive line 3. Right? Saquon needs them to do their job in order to be able to do his. And then 4, I'd go Zach Bond. But, man, to me, that might be the biggest thing how he did this offseason was Zach Bond.
Oh, it is. Yeah. He got lucky, but it is.
Yeah, he did. They found something. And that, again, you're going back to my number 1. Vic Fangio was integral in saying, hey, I think I can do something with this guy. And he was right. And so, they have to get him signed, obviously. I think Zach needs to be here, next year for sure. But those are great. Those are 4 great things that I think you could put in any order, and anybody would be right. That's just the way I
Good
see
stuff
it.
there, Scott. All right, brother. How you seeing this game play out this Sunday? It's a Sunday night matchup. SoFi Stadium, 8-2 Eagles, 5-5 Rams. How do you see
home
it
game
playing
for
out?
the Eagles, by the way. Home game
Most
for the
likely,
Eagles.
They always travel well out there. I think it's going to be like they've been. I think it'll be a close game in the first half. It'll stay relatively close. And then in the second half, this team has averaged in this winning streak, 6-game win streak, they've averaged 17 points per game in the second half, the Eagles have. I think that continues. I think they'll end up winning this game by about double digits because they'll start breaking it open in the second half. But I think we'll be looking at a relatively close game in the first half, and they'll break it open in the second half like they've been. That seems to be their formula for success, and I don't see any reason why it would be different this week.
At S Grayson Box 29. Make sure you follow Scott on the X platform. Does a tremendous job there. Thanks for stopping by. You're in your car. I appreciate that. Appreciate a little bit of extra time. I'm glad we caught up. We're always here. I'll end it with Nick Sirianni. You brought him up a little bit. Boy, I mean, we have to call the fan base here entitled, right? I mean, Philadelphia talks, and it'll happen, by the way, if the LA Rams upset the Philadelphia Eagles this week, there will be a bunch of people calling for Nick Sirianni's job. And as I mentioned, 9-1, Scott, 9-1, 8-2. That's where the Eagles have been through 10 games, 3 consecutive years. If you go back to his first season of 2021, they got up to that 2-5 start. Since that time, they're 40-14. 40-14. And this guy was on the hot seat. And you're right, he was on the hot seat for a very small period of time. What are we doing here? What if that's not good enough? What are we doing?
So I've asked myself that question, like, what has been the issue with Nick? And I think there's two Nicks, right? There's Nick, the football coach, and then there's Nick, the person. Nick, the person was the guy who everybody still remembers, walked in and started talking about fertilizing the ground and plants growing and all that stuff. And
It worked.
everybody's first impression though was, oh my goodness, what is this? And then, first impressions, we all say it, right? They stick with you. And it's something in the back of our minds we'll always go to when we get mad at Nick. So the Nick, the person, is also the guy who's yelling at people, fans for either team, as he's walking off the field so there's that. There's Nick, the person who's bringing his kids to the podium after a midseason game loss or after a midseason game. And so there's all that extra stuff, right? But Nick, the football coach, man, he has his guys ready to play, it seems. He has them ready to go, even when it's like everybody's going, hey, watch out, this could be a trap game. No, they come out. They play well for the most part. He's got them focused. His players like him. And so Nick, the football coach, I think is the guy we've got to try to keep our eye on and not be distracted by. Nick, the human being, who sometimes lets his emotions get the best of him and veers off track a little bit, but he always comes back. He gets reeled in. And I think Nick, the football coach, deserves a lot of credit. And I think that's what everybody needs to start focusing on is Nick, the football coach, and ignore Nick, the human being who sometimes gets sidetracked. And will he still make some calls on fourth down that we question? Will he, still make some bad decisions that everybody wants to rip their hair out? You know what? Every football coach does. But overall, this guy, more often than not, a 2/3 clip winning games. And when you have that going on consistently, don't look the gift horse in the mouth. Again, we did it with Andy Reid. All of us did. And we got consumed by the fact, he's not doing a great job late in the game. He's not managing late game situations. Well, he's going to be a Hall of Fame coach. And when he was here, everybody started to get tired of his act. So Nick Sirianni, I'm not saying Nick's a Hall of Fame coach. I mean, he could be. He's certainly putting up numbers right now.
He's en route. I'll say that.
I think we all need to stop and appreciate a little better. I'm not trying to sit here saying I want to be his publicist or anything, but appreciate a little better what Nick, the football coach, is doing with this group of guys because, it's not nothing. And it could end up leading them to, right back to a Super Bowl.
Well, and I'll say this, Scott, I'll be his publicist for a second. It's ironic. Nick, the person, would win over these morons in 2 minutes. I mean, that's his whole thing.
In a tailgate at a bar.
Yeah,
certainly he'd be right there jumping on tables in Buffalo. Probably
that's his whole thing, man. He gets everybody. He likes everybody. Everybody likes him. He gets the players to play for him, as you mentioned. That's his actual strength. Is getting people on the same page. But yeah, now I'm done the publicist stuff. Nick, you better win if you're listening.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, but you're right. I mean, he is a polarizing guy to the point where any loss, more often than not, it goes to him before it goes to Jalen or somebody else. They look at Nick and like, what was Nick?
And by the way, Scott, that's his strength to Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman. Zander and I talk about it all the time. He's the lightning rod. So people don't look at Howie and Jeffrey to a certain extent.
Yeah, and they'd be 9-1 if not for that one call that a lot of us hated, where they put the ball in the air to Saquon Barkley.
Yeah. Well,
potentially be 9-1.
Yeah. And look, the players still play for Nick. I think that's pretty evident, and that's an important part of the coaching equation for me. And I thought you said that nicely, Scott. Thanks for joining today, brother. It was great catching up with you. Thanks for doing it from the car. We'll talk to you again soon. All right, Scott.
Yeah, you got it. You guys take care. Have a good what is today? Friday. Have a great
Friday. Football Friday.
Yeah.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. Scott. I'll see you down there.
Yeah, make sure you guys follow Scott at S Grayson Fox 29 on Twitter. Scott's a great follow. And he does a good job.
By the way, that's my pet peeve. I love Scott, for people that don't know. But I mean, you can't. But people want Saquon Barkley to be the MVP, and you can't say it's a bad call to put a freaking layup in the hands of the MVP.
Yeah, I knew you didn't like that on the way.
Well, I mean, come on. How could you call the guy the MVP and then you're like, that's a bad decision to put the ball.
Well, and the play worked too. It's not even
Yeah,
like
the
the play
play was
didn't work.
perfect.
Yeah,
It was
the
a
play worked.
perfect play call.
The
Guy
play
dropped the
worked.
football.
Yeah, good stuff, John. We got about an hour left to play here. We'll get to some super chats. Let's see, we have one now from Keith. Thank you, Keith. Appreciate it, man. And we'll do some super chats in hour number 2. We got a full hour here to break down this game. Looking forward to doing that. Keith says, "Great take on Nick." At Scott Grayson. Keith, are you feeling grateful today that Nick Sirianni is the head coach of the
Oh, I don't
Philadelphia
know if
Eagles?
I get grateful. Wow.
I don't know.
If you get grateful
I think
from
Keith likes Nick. Big Keith.
yeah, well, I mean, there's no reason not to if you're an Eagles fan. Top 10.
You say Nick would win everybody over, John. The only
Oh
thing
my God, yeah.
but the only experience I have with Nick, he didn't win me over.
Really?
Nick,
What,
well, no, he was a great guy. He was a very nice guy, but he gave me a weak, flimsy handshake, and I'm one of those people
well,
that doesn't like the weak,
football
flimsy handshake.
players, sometimes their hands are banged up, so it's dependent on,
Yeah, I'm
who.
not buying that one on Nick, though. Sorry.
I don't know. I've never shaken his hand. I tend to, in the post COVID world, I'm a fist bump guy. I don't shake anybody's hand anymore.
Yeah, this actually might have been in the heat of. When was that when he won that award at the Maxwells and Jacob was producing the Maxwell Awards? I think it was 2 years ago. Jalen was there, Brandon Graham was there, Big Dom was there.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't a respect thing, Dank Bird Gang. It was. I mean, he shook everybody's hand in the back. He just had a little bit of a dead fish. That's all. A little soft. It was a little too soft for my
You
life.
don't want. Trust me, I've gotten the opposite of that with, most notably, Adrian Peterson. You don't want that. You don't want the opposite.
What, the firm handshake? I like a
Yeah.
firm handshake. What's your
Oh no, you don't. Yeah. I'm talking about a vice. I'm not talking about a firm handshake. I'm talking about a vice. And actually, that's number 2. I tell the story all the time. At 65 years old, I met Jim Marshall for the first time. Unbelievable hand strength. I can't even describe it. I was begging to get out of
John,
there.
I will back down from nobody when it comes to a nice
Nolan
firm.
Smith, by the way, was
firm.
shaking people's hands the other day. He's got a firm handshake.
Good. Every man should have a firm handshake for crying
No,
out
you
loud.
shouldn't shake hands now. You should fist
Oh,
bump.
John, don't give me that bullshit.
Should fist bump.
John's team fist bump post COVID.
Team fist bump. No, it's not post COVID because COVID is I don't want to get into that, but it's common sense. It should have been done for years, but germs are a big thing. I'm not, I'm talking
No,
about
I know
just
there are
common
people
cold.
that care about germs. John, I've always been the person that doesn't care about germs. And I mean, I don't get sick much. I didn't get sick at all growing up. I never missed a day of school growing up for being sick.
Well, you're
Ever.
young. At
Well,
some point
yeah, that's true.
you'll get sick.
At some point, it'll change.
The point is it's a germ factory.
Yeah. No,
Not
but I mean,
anything
some
else.
people, they deal with somebody and they run to the bathroom to wash their hand or they have the hand sanitizer. I think you're that guy. You
I'm
hand
not, I'm
sanitizers
not,
everywhere.
no, I'm not at the Howie Mandel level. He does that, but yeah, I got the hand sanitizer in the car at all times. Yeah, I mean, the minute they got Purell stations all over the building for a
I know.
reason.
Yeah.
You're in an NFL locker room. Yeah.
Hate the smell of that stuff, man. I prefer to not. I prefer to not use it. But anyway, I digress. When I did meet Nick, though, he did have the dead fish, which made me judge him a little bit. I'm not
Well,
gonna lie to you.
yeah, that
Jalen
I'm
Hurts, no dead fish. Brandon Graham, no dead fish. Big Dom, John, no dead fish there.
probably shook Brandon's hand over the years before I shipped it to the fist bump because he's been around so long. But everybody else, no, I'm 100% fist bump now.
Yeah, I get it. All right, good stuff. Let's get to our commercial break. We'll have it opened up hour number 2 here. Time to dive into this game deep. We've covered a lot of it, but there is some interesting things in this game. I think the most interesting is what do you do to take away Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Maybe you don't take them away. How do you limit them? How do you put yourself in a position to overcome what they're going to provide? They've been a much better offense with those two players on the field who both battled with injuries early in the year. So it'll be interesting to see how this game plays out from that perspective. And we'll break all that down. Coming up next here on Birds 365. Before I take our break, I want to tell you guys about the great people at BetUS, the best betting company. You can see the promo code I just put on your screen. It's YouTube 150, and it gives you a 150% sign-up bonus on your very first deposit. And you get 125% on your second and third deposit, all up to $2,000. So deposit less and bet with more at BetUS. Go to betus.com.pa. That's betus.com.pa. We'll be back in 3 minutes, everybody, on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.